It's been 30 years since the West Coast Eagles won their first Premiership, a groundbreaking moment for the club and the AFL. Welcome to History Makers, a new series in which Eagles media goes behind the scenes on 1992, with the players, the coaches, and in this first episode, the match committee. Rob Wiley, Tim Gepp, Ian Miller and Trevor Nisbett. Gentlemen, welcome. When was the last time you were all in a room together reflecting on 1992?
Well, I think we just worked it out, didn't we? We had a 20-year reunion, so how long ago was that, Rob?
20 years ago.
10.
I thought it was about 10 years, Timmy. Mick came back from Collingwood and it was a great reunion, always is. And as I said, it was just great to reflect and the memories get better to us.
Well, speaking of Mick, we did have a chance to actually chat to Mick Malthouse and he reflected on what 1992 meant to him.
You know, the significance of 1992 goes far beyond West Coast winning and beating Geelong. It is a defining moment in football. It legitimises the AFL because it needed a non-Victorian side to win a premiership.
So Niz, what do you think? Is it a defining moment in the sport's history?
Oh, absolutely. I don't think there's any doubt about what it meant to Australian football and the significance of a national comp. I think the other thing that it did, and I think Jeff Christian spoke to me after the game, he said, look, this may never happen again. It was such a journey for us to get there, and then to actually win it was something incredible. And I don't think, probably now we reflect on it and think what a wonderful achievement it was. And we're just fortunate we've been able to do it again because we didn't know if any non-Victorian club was going to do it. And then, of course, Brisbane have done it and Adelaide have done it and Port have. So, I mean, it is significant. It's great for the game and it means it's truly national.
Serge, you were in the VFL, you're in Waffle. What does it mean in terms of the national code? Where did it come of age?
Oh, well, I thought that 91, the speech that Mick gave post-grand final that we lost was a good catalyst for 92 and it was significant in the history of the game, and having watched the game a couple of weeks ago again to refresh the memory, it was, and we won again, so that was good. It was just fantastic, and the way the game was played, and the vigour and the intensity in the game by both sides was amazing.
Serge, when you talk about 91 and the significance of winning it, I thought it started in 91. All the VFL clubs were starting to panic that it may happen that it'll go outside of Victoria. So to me, it started in 91 when we got beaten by Hawthorn, but there was a lot of panic amongst the other clubs.
You asked about the significance of it. Obviously, us three having played in the VFL, they would never have contemplated that. At Richmond, they were never going to contemplate that a team from Western Australia was going to win a premiership. And I think Robert having been involved in Richmond's premiership and how big that was,
yep.
And then to see us do it, I mean, I think the thing that really a lot of people in the East never realised is how big the Eagles were going to become as a club. And that day, the support we had across this whole state was just some of the vision that we saw later was just remarkable.
And no one will ever realise how hard it is to travel across one side of the country to the other to win consistently. And that's the amazing part to me that was, so important that we're able to handle that over the journey of this short time that we were in the AFL and to win it eventually in 92.
Did part of it feel like almost a crusade, Niz?
Yeah, it was a bit. When we first started putting this team together at the end of 1989 and into 1990, it was a difficult transition to say to all of our players, look, we had to have a different mindset to be able to win and win away from home. And consequently, the end of even 1990 when we travelled 6 weeks in a row and won our first final, then in 91 where we won 12 games in a row and we were a significant threat in 91 and to go down, and then the next year to bounce back. And we had a shocking start to the year, 92, a really ordinary one win out of the first four, and It was, people were back on their heels thinking, look, we may not get there, and to the guys' credit and the squad that we formed, it was they dug in, and I think it was a build. It wasn't something that just came out of the blue, and it was a significant build.
And I think, Niz, when you said, 91 is 92, I think the boys may have thought it was going to happen in 92, and our start that Niz just mentioned was horrific. To me, the turning point was down in Tasmania when the boys had a meeting by themselves, kicked out the coaches, and they set some rules that I reckon changed the season, and we just grew from there.
What about you guys as a match committee? Now, you guys sound pretty close. Would you describe yourself as a close group of guys that have known each other for a long time?
We are now. I don't know if we were at the time. I mean, at the time it was really Ian Serge and Trevor Sprigg was obviously involved as well, who was a great Western Australian football identity, and I think Niz knows it better than me, but I think Mick came involved and basically got a couple of people like Rob and I involved, and then the club got Serge and Spriggy. So we sort of didn't know each other intimately. We were sort of put together, and it was a bit of and then Niz was sort of the catalyst of it all, sort of sit back and see how we all went. So we didn't know when that first started in 1990, really, was it, that we were going to be as close as we were. And I think one of the most significant things about the whole period of time was, one, how good our team was and how good they were on the field, but we were very, very close off the field. I mean, we'd become great friends for life, but we had a great time and we had each other's backs and we had a good laugh, and it was great times.
Well, Mick has some opinions about the match committee. Have a listen to this.
Of all my times in football, when I first started at Footscray, I was 30 and the match committee were a lot older. Going to West Coast, it was probably the best combination that I'd ever had, because we're all relatively the same age. There was only 1 or 2 years, or 4 or 5 years at the best difference. So it wasn't only us; it was our partners that all got on so well, and we created a family within a family. The late Trevor Sprigg was just one of those blokes that you just loved. The tradition was we'd come to Melbourne, we knew that the players would go for a walk in the morning before breakfast. We'd have a game of tennis. Spriggy'd have the biggest swig, the biggest suck on his fag prior to a shot. No matter where you hit it, if it was down his end, he'd call you out. If it was up our end, he'd say it was in, it could be out by a metre. He had poor eyesight for the ones that he shot. Gepp would join in occasionally. Serge was great. Robbie thought he was Boris Becker without hair. It was just outstanding. And George, don't forget Georgie Yane. Of course, then you had Niz, who was a settling influence on all of us. So how we survived match committee was unbelievable, because it was always on a Tuesday night, and Niz would go off for about 3/4 of an hour and come back with about $30 worth of chips, 10 pizzas, and anything else that made us fat. So we're always, it was just such a great time. And when you have a great time and you enjoy each other's company like that, you get the best out of each other. We can still argue, we can still talk about the positions that we should fill and should not fill, and who should be part of them and who shouldn't be. And then you travel so often together. And not only do you travel so often together, you share the pain of a loss coming back. It's 3 hours on the plane of losing by a couple of points to Essendon or Melbourne or Carlton or whatever the case is, and you've dissected the game 100 times over, but in the end, you're sure you've come up with the right result for the next week. So important times, important people, lovely people, great friendships, lifelong friendships.
His recollection is pretty strong. What do you think, Serge?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that the thing was that with Mick from day one, was he said to us, you can enjoy yourselves, but remember you've always got a job to do. And I don't think we ever wavered off that, and that was significant too to the group. But we became very good friends, but we always realised we had a job to do. So,
no doubt about that. And I think, it always starts from the top. And the playing group could see that we were together as one. We were never fractured. Yes, we would have amazing discussions in the match committee room, I think out of all the years, we probably won 2 or 3 against Mick. It was pretty hard to change his mind. And that's why he was such a great coach. But we had fun, and the pizzas and a couple of beers, and when we travelled, the tennis. It was just memorable. And I'd know for myself that I couldn't wait to get to training. I couldn't wait to be amongst the playing group, but I couldn't wait to be amongst, our fellow match committee members, because we just had laughs, and it was so enjoyable.
This is something that I feel like the fans don't necessarily know, the match committee and how close it is, the bonds that you have. How important is it for success?
Well, very important. We actually thought we'd won money, because I was had a news agency at the time, and I got the boys to join in as a lotto syndicate in those days. And in those days, it was lotto plus what was it?
Super 66.
Super 66. And Geppy and Niz would go and get the pizzas, and someone jokingly said to me, you got a brush to do your hair. Funny. I said, well, Geppy will have one. And anyway, then I go to Geppy's bag and there's all this cash. And I thought, oh, what's going on here? So my Niz and Geppy get back, and we're having our pizzas, and Serge said, how do we go on, setting this up, how did we go on lotto this week, Rob? I said, no good, but we've won Super 66. With that, I've just chucked all this cash up in the air. Well, you should have seen Niz and Geppy's face. It was
we actually know what it's like to feel like you've won lottery. We thought we'd won it. We were like, it wasn't until I realised what he'd done that I
Well, Serge and Niz and I never had that much money. Geppy's always had the money,
That's very unfair.
But they're the sorts of things that we did. We had a laugh, but when it became serious, then bang, it was focusing on what we had to do.
What about disagreements over players' selection? How did you resolve the disagreements? Who had the final say, all that sort of stuff?
Mick had the final say, and Mick was a genius. Sometimes he was very good at letting you leave match committee on a Tuesday night or whatever night it was, and the next morning he'd come in and Robbie mightn't been there, and I'd come in, Mick had spoken, and it might be, you'd look at the board and he'd say, I was going to speak to you blokes, we've actually changed this around, or there's a bit of a move here, which still happens today. At the end of the day, there's always a chop and change. So the coach always has to have the final say. And Michael was a genius with a nizzle with like the doctors. Like Mick saw himself, and really was in his way, wasn't he? He'd sit down with the doctors and go through more stuff with Rod more than Rod Moore knew about. So we didn't have to worry about the medical side of things, because he would go in and go through every player and be telling the docs that half the time, no, he'll be all right, he can play, and he'd get a bloke over the line if he wanted him to play. Even nowadays, he'd be scanned and wouldn't be getting a game, and it'd be all different than what it was then.
Well, I think you mentioned Mick. Mick saw himself as a doctor, and Rod saw himself as a coach. So it was really entertaining.
I think trying to win arguments with Mick, if you gave him a one-liner like Miller should be playing at centre-half forward, he'd shoot you down like no tomorrow. You actually had to give a reason why you thought a player should be in a position. Then he might listen to you. I wouldn't say he would, but he really believed that, if you're going to say something, say it with reason, not just give me one-liners.
There used to be there's a lot of pressure on during games. I mean, and even today, nothing's changed there. But we used to have often funny ways of what's the word? Alleviating. I'm going well here. Alleviating the pressure was having a bit of a laugh in the box. So the boys would go down, and might be Serge and I back up there, or Spriggy and Georgie Young in his time. There's always something funny happening again to try and take the pressure off. So the number of times I could always get Serge laughing. And if I got Serge laughing, it'd be very hard for him to stop laughing. Like, Mick would come back in the box and he'd say something like, what's going on here? And Serge would be just looking at him, he couldn't. And I'd say, nothing. We just saw as a guy out in the field, and it'd be like that teacher at school, the last thing you wanted to be doing was laughing in the box when Mick came back. I mean, he wouldn't have taken too kindly to that unless he was leading the charge in that way.
There was a moment, wasn't there, Serge, where the phone broke down in the whacker box or something like that, and he was going ballistic?
I think, as Niz would attest, is that Mick broke the phone in the first quarter of this game, and we had a technician come up at quarter time, and the technician was still under the box trying to fix the phone, and we're saying, mate, you need to get out, because Mick's coming up. He said, I haven't fixed it, mate, you need to get out. So we got out, and a minute into the second quarter, Mick picked the phone up. What's wrong with this phone? None of us could tell him what was wrong with it. I think someone just said, it's broken.
Let's go back to 91. So was it heartbreak, or was it a missed opportunity? How did you guys summarise it all?
It was a missed opportunity. Nizzy alluded to it. We played, what did you say, 12 games in a row we won?
We won 12 in a row in
those
91.
12 games. Go back and have a look at those. Some of the best football West Coast ever played. I remember, was that Turley had a purple patch that year and was just on song. And whole team. No one could get near us, especially 10 of those 12.
Mick said that we needed more big game players. He said he was concerned that there was a few guys that were lacking on the big stage, didn't name names, but what did you think as a match committee?
I did think Michael always rated players who played well in the big games, and I think a lot of coaches do, but Mick was very big on it. He thought that if you were able to step up when you played really good opposition, you were going to make the grade, and consequently, working through. Remember, this is only Mick's third year with the footy club, so he was still working through the players, as were the rest of the match committee, trying to work out how some players, tick, how they prepare, whether they're ready for the big stage, and consequently by 92 we had a group of players I think that were so determined to win, and Michael got them together, and eventually we got to the stage where we had so much belief, I think, from a club perspective, let alone just the team. I think from a club perspective, we had an expectation to win.
I think too, Niz, 91 was, and Gepp, we played some brilliant football, but we came up against a hardened, experienced, tough side in Hawthorn. And to me, when I reflect, it was a bit of our learning curve. It was a bit of our way to go to win a flag. And, at half-time, I think we were 10 points down. But I could see from my eyes that the body language that the players didn't think they could win. There was no belief, as what Niz just said. Yet 12 months later, at half-time against Geelong, we're 10 points down. But there was no way we were going to lose because their body language, you could see it in their eyes that they had learnt from last year and this year was going to be ours.
But I often say that, but at half-time in 92, there was 7 of the blokes weren't in the room when Mick spoke. And the person who spoke the most at the half-time in 92 was Summer. I mean, he drowned Mick out in the end. I mean, I thought that when Sumich stood up and said, I don't know, because Mick made a comment along the lines of, this reminds me a lot of last year. And Summer went, bullshit, it doesn't, stood up and went, it does not remind me of that. And Mick looked at him, and then all of a sudden a few of the players chimed in. Then it was basically time to go because Pike had been knocked out, Maney had split his webbing, and you were running around. I remember you looking up a few times, we haven't got everybody in there, it was sort of and we were like, everyone said it wasn't. There's always organised chaos at halftime, whatever game it is. Nothing's ever perfectly presented, but they certainly went out and started to. And once they started to get going, I reckon then you started to feel, here we come. But I certainly didn't walk out thinking at halftime, we're on song here. At the end of the day.
Yeah, so I did.
It's funny,
I just saw it so differently, Tim. And,
well, you were down there listening with the ball. I just from where I was sitting.
No, I was just in the rooms at halftime. That's where I saw a big difference to Hawthorn because there wasn't that belief, but in '92 there was.
Well, guys, let's go back to the start of the season because it actually didn't start that well, coming off the minor premiership, losing a grand final. Actually 10th after 7 rounds. Was there any panic at all?
Well, I don't know if there's any panic, but certainly we're in a precarious spot even after 4 rounds. Things weren't going well. We'd won 1 game, we'd drawn another, and I think amongst, internally, we knew we had a good squad. It was a matter of getting going. And once we got going, I think there was a real pattern to the year. We'd win 4 and lose 1, and we'd win 4 and lose 1, and that pattern continued for the whole year. And we had if you think about it, we just dropped games out of the blue sometimes. They weren't. There was no major reason for it. We had a good enough team to beat anyone, but there were just certain games we didn't play well in, and even. The game against Footscray in the second last game of the year. It was in the mud, wasn't it? Yep. Out at Footscray, and cold. We didn't kick a goal till the last quarter. So I mean, it was that sort of year, and we just had bad spots. Fortunately, we won the last 4, so that meant the premiership. But it was a strange year.
Yeah, and as I said, that was really powerful. I think the players really took ownership after that, the loss down in Tasmania.
Against Fitzroy.
Against Fitzroy. And they came out wanting to do extra running on a Monday night. It was what they wanted to do. And so everyone had to be involved. And to me, that was a really powerful message that we're not taking this, we've been through it, we're going to do something ourselves. And that was, to me, what the group was. They were an amazing group. and very mentally strong. And I think that was the turning point for me.
Mick talked about this a little bit, the flight home. You guys had a lot of discussions about where the season was at. Do you remember that at all?
Oh, well, I remember that Fitzroy, because we had to go via Melbourne, and Fitzroy sat up the front, and our bloke sat down the back. But I remember that game, as it's been alluded to earlier on today, is that when Doc Wheeldon was the full forward, kicked one from the forward pocket in mid-air, and we were sitting in the grandstand as the match committee right behind it. I'm not sure where Niz and Robbie were. And we thought, well, once you start doing that. And then also we were using walkie-talkies. And during that
Not for long.
session, no, not for long, there was someone got on the walkie-talkie, the police, and said, you are on the wrong frequency. You need to change. And Mick said, no.
No, Mick just got the walkie-talkie when the police came and just threw it out the window in the box. We're like, what are you doing?
So that was not a good day.
No. I know where I was, Serge. I was running that many messages because Mick had lots to say.
And then over was on a slant, wasn't it? One way or the other, it was
easy to run out.
It was weird ground.
Smallest oval in the world.
Mind you, everyone thinks that we all thought that the players had their locked. They had the room and it was locked, the doors were locked, but we were outside the room and we could hear everything. There was plenty going on. It was really good. The conversations they had amongst themselves then were brutally honest. And we were like, I remember, might have even been you said, this will go one of two ways, because there was no holding back when the boys went at each other, and it was like, and the proof's in the pudding now, but they went onward and upward, but it could have gone.
There were a couple of players singled out, probably unfairly too, that the guys were talking about, but in the end, those players responded really well, and they were really responsible for helping us get back on track and get in the winning way. So I think it worked out really well. But that was really a lot of it was led by Michael Brennan. A lot of it with John and the leadership group. Once we got it all together, it was pretty good. And remember, Whoosh at that stage was a very young captain, and he was finding his feet in the captaincy as well.
Was there a little bit of questions around the physicality and the contested stuff with the team? There was a bit of scrutiny in the media. Mick talked about this a little bit. Did that change? Did training get harder?
I don't know. That doesn't recall my memory of that. I always thought we could. We've learned over time, Mick was a very hard-nosed coach, and so he wouldn't take, Don Pike was a magnificent outside runner, and he wasn't going to stay in the side that Mick Malthouse coached unless he changed, and he became one of the best run-with, hard-nosed players. So to me, winning or losing the contest wasn't an issue for us. It was the belief, I think, that, we can play the best football on the road or at home. And I think it was more about knowing how to win away from Subiaco.
And I think you look at the players we had, they were talented players. It was a talented list.
On every line there was a star player. Yeah, I don't think we ever worried about how physically tough we were. I mean, you think of some of those boys, they didn't take their eyes off the ball, whether they were forward or back. There was very few in that. You wouldn't have got a game, as Rob said. You didn't play for Mick if you weren't tough at the football. And there's plenty of guys that come in and out of the side, but if you weren't tough, you didn't stay in the side too long.
So there's a 4-game winning streak after that, and he talks about process and that sort of thing. What do you guys think it was? Was it leadership, team leadership?
Yeah, look, it's always hard to put your finger on why people change, but we knew from the previous year we had a good enough team, and we'd only built on that team. We hadn't gone backwards. It was a matter of getting them all to focus on, okay, well, now we've got our backs to the wall a bit. We're not playing as well as we should and can. But I think, with all due respects to everybody externally telling us how to play, I think our match committee, our coaches and everyone got it right. And that is, we focused on the things that we can control, and that is getting the footy. And when we get hold of the football, and we were really good. I mean, no one was going to beat us if we got the footy first, and that's really where we focused.
Well, when we beat Hawthorn here in that first final, which was a great game, I remember Matera played on Pritchard, and they were sort of best. They were the days.
The one which took out Dermott.
Yeah. I just remember afterwards it was a cracking game, and because Joyce was coaching Hawthorn, wasn't he? And Joyce, he wanted to come in to our rooms. And Mickey, there was a fair bit of rivalry. They'd beaten us in the grand final year before, and there was a fair bit of rivalry. I remember looking out there, someone came to me and said, Gepp, Alan Joyce is coming in. I've gone. I remember I said to Mick, Joyce is coming in to talk to you. And Mick looked around, and Alan came in and said, great game of football. You play like that, no one will beat you. I remember him, and he wasn't he was a pretty serious guy, Joycey, and Mick shook his hands, and that was unheard of, and for the coaches to sort of connect after a game and come in and sort of say that. And so I think that really was watching that game back a few times again too, was a great game of football. And I think as you said, from then on when we were playing Geelong again, I think our confidence was really, once we'd beaten Hawthorn, we were like, right, okay, hang on, now then the second semi we were away, and then bang.
And the fact the team was trailing in that game and came back and won, which also happened in the grand final, was that part of the confidence?
Oh, look, I think it always gives a side confidence if you can come from behind to win.
Go back to the middle of the season. State of origin. Now, this is a concept that a lot of people don't know today, or young people might not know today. In 1991, we had 14 players play state of origin. Mick said that was a flashpoint in the season, that they weren't the same for the rest of the year after that. In 92, there was a lot less players that played. Was it a conundrum, the state of origin situation?
I remember the 91 that was hailed. It was at the Wacker, wasn't it? Fortunately, my head got a hammering, Tyson, that night. I was running for Mick, and it was bloody hard.
It was a really difficult one. Chris Mainwaring was captain that night in 91, and we had a lot of players playing in it, and we dominated the game. We were really good and outstanding, but we didn't come back from that, which was difficult. And that additional game didn't help us, for sure. And it's always, we were never in favour of having the state of origin games because of that reason, that a lot of our players were going to have to play that additional game. Some of them weren't ready for that game either. And from that point on, it was really awkward. And the following year with state of origin, I mean, there were less players and less pressure on our guys to get a game. So, in the state of origin, so it worked out a lot better.
Do you remember Mick in 91? Because Bairstow played for us, didn't he, in 91 in the state of origin?
Yes.
Yeah. So I remember Mick, and when we used to work, because Bairstow's playing for Geelong, and Michael was very, very, one of the early days, even when he was playing with him at Richmond and then playing with him for a year at the Bulldogs, he was paranoid about the opposition knowing about what you were doing. And he was one of the first, wasn't he, to close training or watch. Remember the rivals between Sheedy and Mick about who was watching training or tying down the sock and all that sort of shenanigans that went on. But I'll never forget Bairstow playing, and Mick was determined to get Bairstow to think that we didn't tag, and we were like, well, we've got Dwayne Lamb and Donnie Pike. And he goes, no, but we'll make him realise that it's an illusion. I want him to think that they're tagging. And so we let Bairstow go out in that game, and he said, don't worry, you just go attack, do what you like. If we get going, play forward. And he said, no. And he was really worried that he had to defend. And Mick said, no, off you go. And I'll never forget, as he played pretty well, but he had Dwayne Lamb covering for him, so Dwayne would be coming off the forward line and running behind the play. And Bairstow, we always, whether it happened, went back and hoped that he said to Geelong, they're not as defensive as they make out they are.
I think it was always good in state of origin, though, because you could let the guys play.
So after that, 13-3 until the finals, which is a pretty amazing run. Is there anything else you remember about that time? There was obviously the victory at Cardinia Park.
Did we get beaten against Hawthorn here at Subiaco in the first finals of 91?
In 91, yeah.
We did, not 92 though.
No, but this is what I'm saying. In 91, we lost when we were expected to win. Yeah. And whether that impacted us too, yet in 92 when we won, and I think we got a little bit of a hook up to because a sixth side beat a first side.
Yeah, correct.
So we had a little bit more of a better run in 92 compared to 91. And that helped our momentum, whereas we were dented a little bit in 91, in my view, by losing that game.
I reckon also in 91, we had the whole state expecting us to win a grand final. And irrespective of what we tried to do internally, you couldn't stop the momentum of what everybody was thinking.
But again, we got Mickey got nervous and we didn't want to go on the parade. In 91, there's a lot going on. I just think in the end when we started to realise that you guys might have had discussions about whatever it is we do, we just embrace what we have to do. Let's get over there, let's get on with it. And we'd been there, the boys had been there, and I don't know if there ever was a tape of as someone spoke about before, Michael's speech after 91. if you ever heard that, he didn't miss anybody in 91 after did he? He came down and he went and he told everyone exactly what he thought of how we were too far ahead of ourselves. And all that.
Yeah. I think the other thing, of course, in the difference between the 2 years is that we were still trying to educate Melbourne-based administrators at head office that we had other obstacles to overcome when we're playing in a national competition, which are so different to everybody else. I'm still trying to do that today, to get people to understand the vagaries and the differences between trying to play out of Perth and having to travel more than any other club in the country. And we were going through our initial stages of trying to get some things in place, and we certainly couldn't get the travel arrangements or anything in place that we needed. So it was a difficult time, and our guys were so resilient to be able to get through that.
Well, even now though, when you get like Simo, when Simo first came in and being that rivalry that North Melbourne and West Coast had over two really good sides, and Simo always thought that North were better, and we talk about how our 90s side was much better. But talking to him now, he always said first off, I'm not sure you guys, you might overplay this travel thing a bit. Have a talk to him now about what he thinks about it. Until you've done it and been involved in it and see these boys what they go through, how they recover, have to keep buttering up. It's an unbelievable effort what they get through.
Yeah, it has some great pluses, but there are a lot of things to overcome.
This was 30 years ago. Times were really different. No mobile phones, no cameras, that sort of thing. The players probably got away with a lot more back then. They had a fair bit of fun probably off the field. Is there any stories that you guys remember just from recollection in terms of bonding between the players that actually probably worked out pretty well?
We used to get upgraded if you left after 8 o'clock out of Melbourne or Sydney, and the boys were allowed to have a drink, and I think a lot of them, when they landed in Perth, then went to a nightclub. So in those days you didn't train on Sunday morning and all that sort of stuff. I remember walking down the back of the plane one night and David Hart and Troy Ugle had a couple, and they said, "Serge, we're thinking of opening up a sports shop. What do you think?" I said, "Probably not."
Well, David Hart used to often, as the plane got nearing Perth, get up the courage and decide he'd come up and have a talk. He started calling Mick's nickname to us was Bushy, and he'd say, "I'm going to have a chat to Bushy now." And we go, "Go on, David." And Mick would always be asleep. And Juve would sort of half sneak up, and all the boys would be watching whether he'd do it. I don't think he ever had the guts to wake him up, because if he had it, wouldn't have gone down too well.
We sung a few songs on the way back, Juve. And when the plane discipline wasn't as it is today with stewards and so on, they let the guys walk around a lot more and do a lot more on the plane. But there's some funny times on the way home.
I don't think Mick was ever asleep. He pretended to be.
Well, do you remember the player review nights, which was kind of like the gala nights where you'd raise some funds and that sort of thing for the club? Anything to share from those ones?
Hilarious nights.
Well, some were embarrassing, of course, for us. You're sitting there watching them and you're going, what are these guys doing? But, they were good. I think in those days it was pretty harmless fun, and it was the interaction with our members and supporters that was a lot of fun. But you see these guys, the players performing every week in front of, thousands of fans and also lots of viewers and lots of people, and then to get them up on stage, they had to have a few drinks under their belt to do it, because they were, they really struggled with that.
Well, shake your tail feather, was it? David Hart.
That was David Hart and Beansy, David Hines. But I think the good part about that was that our players worked. So it was a great forum for them to be able to get together and bond, be able to create their productions. Whereas these days they're all full-time footballers, and so they share their time all together. But our guys were working, coming together, and so being able to spend hours upon hours, because some spent hours upon hours to do a good production on stage, others were pretty ordinary. I remember the one with Spider Burton and Dean Kemp, where Dean Kemp sat on his knee.
Mr. Baseman.
Yeah. So they were funny times. I think in the initial days it was probably, great laughs. It became a big production, didn't we? We went to Entertainment Centre, I think, one year.
Yeah.
They sold tickets and,
I think the good point Robbie brings up is that about 92 and that era, as well, is that everyone worked. And like Peter Simic, for example, would be up at 5 at the Market Garden and then come to training. If they did weights, to get home at 10, be up at 5 the next day doing the same thing.
Some of those photos of Woosha at the chemist shop, seriously, people wouldn't take him seriously as a player. They'd take off the glasses and the Superman.
Woosha used to work in the pharmacy up at Garden City, and if there was a concern about Woosha, Mick would say, "Oh, go and make sure you say good day to Woosha." And the dispensary was right at the back of the pharmacy, and I'd go and talk to Woosha. He'd have the spectacles on, and he'd say, "Yep, I'm good." He'd have the white coat on. I'd get to the front of the shop, I'd turn around and he'd just have a grin on his face. I'm not telling you anyway.
Is it true he ran down a shoplifter once at Garden City?
Yeah, that was Serge. But, in 87 when we first started, Woosha was studying to become a pharmacist. And, I roomed with Woosha a few times. We'd get over there and I'd have to have the TV on really low because he was studying. And that was what they had to do. They had to travel, they had to study or work and play. So it was amazing to achieve what we did in 92 with all those obstacles that was going for. I mean, every club has obstacles, but ours was that little harder, I reckon, to be able to tie it all in together to win a premiership.
Just going into the grand final, another comparison from 91 was the parade situation, which I don't know if it was affected by the fact that Waverley was the destination the next day. But did you think that was a factor, doing things differently and actually embracing the grand final week?
It depends whether you win or lose. I mean, in 91, if we'd won the game, everyone would have said, "Oh, that was a great move." I mean, when you lose, you should have done it, you should have done this, should have done that. At the time, we made the decision based around our travel and accommodation arrangements, and we were given no opportunity to explain that. So we just said, "Well, look, if we can't get the right travel arrangements, we won't go." And we didn't get it, so we didn't go, and it's as simple as that. Mick was worried about us going over too early, getting ready, far too early for a grand final, and we hadn't been in one before, so it was all brand new. Yeah, the next year we were able to get the right arrangements, the right times, the right accommodation, etc., and it worked. So, it's just circumstance.
Do you remember walking onto the G the day before the game? Mick Malthouse says that there was one side of the field that was really wet and another side that wasn't. And of course, you had a fast player that was very suitable for one side of the ground. Did you guys think the same thing?
You and I over-T, didn't you?
Well, I remember kicking the ball and I did accidentally slip, which I've slipped a couple of times during my football career. Post-career, I mean. And Geppy was standing next to me and he laughed all the way back to the race. But, yeah, it was pretty wet.
But I don't remember you saying that we play material on one side of the ground and Mainwaring on the other. I don't remember that, getting down and doing that part of it.
We used to do that at Subiaco Oval regularly. And but if it was the case on match day, Michael would make that move when he needed to.
He thought it was the MCC side, the members side.
I reckon he did. I reckon Mick did talk about that, and I reckon that's where Matera played most of the football on that grand final day.
No, Matera started on the MCC wing side.
Yeah.
The closest to the box.
Yeah,
all day.
Well, that's what you're saying.
That's where he kicked all the goals.
That's the wet side.
Was that the wet side?
No,
it was the dry side.
He was saying that was the dry side.
The MCC was the dry side.
Yes, that's correct, and that's what I'm saying. Matera
he certainly played on that side.
What about the walk to the game? I mean, that's an unusual thing by today's standards. I mean, you drive right up to the gate and get right in there. Was the walk bizarre? Was there anyone abused? What did you think about that situation?
Oh, well, it was something we'd discussed, and it's 500 metres. It wasn't a big walk, but in those days, I think you could get away with it. So we took the risk, and it was only a small risk, but the guys were up for it, and we walked over. We got a bit of abuse. Most of the players got a little bit of abuse, but I mean,
bit of a laugh.
That's going to happen from time to time. But I thought it was quite strategic.
The walk back was better.
Yeah.
Well, the things that to get to there, from the Hilton to go there, it would even take it was just such a hassle to get on a bus and go all that. It was much easier as long as it.
We had a good bus driver, but it was still easy. Donny.
What about before the game? The nerves, were they much of a factor for you guys? Mick talks about going to the toilet 3 times.
Well, I don't know about everybody else, but everyone would have been nervous. I mean,
totally.
Players, the coaches, the fans,
stage.
Everyone's nervous. It's a matter of what degree, I guess, and how you can control it. Was that the year the Seekers sung?
And that's next year.
Yep.
No, 94 wasn't the Seekers.
Oh, the Seekers might have been 94, but you know, the entertainment was big and lots of dancing and carrying on. I reckon some of the players start to relax once they get in the rooms, and so does everybody else, because you just do your job.
If you didn't have nerves, there'd be something wrong with you. So, you know.
Massive.
I remember going into the coaches' box, and the two coaches' boxes then were together, and I remember looking over, and Mick said, don't look at the opposition. Then he said all of a sudden, Nashi, you look and report.
So was the box, was that position near the MCC members? Which
Yeah,
Right
they
in
were
the
both
middle
together.
of just in front of their committee box is where the two boxes are.
But talking about Nashi, though, I mean, he used to be the scout for Mick and go and look at opposition training in Melbourne, and got caught in a scoreboard one time, locked in the scoreboard.
At the Junction Oval.
Yeah, because Mick used to love reports on the opposition. He wanted to know everything about it. So
I remember Mick. I remember them training at the Wacker one day. Did we play Geelong at the Wacker over here?
Yep.
I remember we got to the Wacker off the record and was able to get one of the super boxes upstairs and watch them train. And I remember getting hold of Mick. I must have rung him on the mobile, whatever it was, and coming back and watching them train. I kept saying, "Oh, there's a bloke in the middle. He's kicking the ball magnificently." And Mick, who was it? Who was it? I kept saying, he must have kicked 5 60, 70-metre torps. And Mick's looking at me, who are you talking about? Well, it was Blight. And Blight was standing in the middle of the Wacker, just teeing off with these magnificent torps. Did Michael unload it on me? He didn't find that funny when we meant to report back on the game.
Robbie, what are the famous image of you in the rooms before the game, the players linking arms?
Yep.
Was that an emotional, exciting moment to be a part of?
Well, it was part of my role as runner, to warm up. I mean, obviously now sports science just control that, but Mick just said, "You do that," and so it was a bit about warming him up and getting him to the right adrenaline stage, and that part was just a circle of trust. That when we're together, 20 players together, that we can't be broken. And
Did you do that all year, or did you start it halfway through?
I did it a few times, and I think it was games that we needed to win. But it's just in there, just trying to get the messages that Mick wanted about us being a team and how strong we are together. And I don't think they loved it, because it was quite hard holding it. I know if I was a player, I wouldn't have liked it. But that was just part, and it was great to reflect and have a look at it.
Mick said there was a lot of chatter at half-time, and he had to tell him to shut up and just relax.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, that's what he's saying, because it was. I don't think he even got to give the speech that he really wanted to give.
Well, the time was running out because we were trying to get guys patched up. But the turning point was really Evo's couple of goals before half-time, and which gave us that little bit of, the guys were always going to believe in themselves and finish the game off well. I don't think we had any doubt with that. It was whether we're going to be good enough. Geelong were a seasoned team and a very good football team, so it took a lot to beat them. And at half-time, I was with Robbie. I thought the feel in the room was terrific, considering we had some issues, with some of our players. But they were never going to they certainly weren't going to surrender.
Well, we smashed them in the last game of the year that year, didn't we, Geelong?
Second semi.
No, second semi we beat them. But didn't we play them down there? Wouldn't we play them in Cardinia Park? I just always thought there's some sides I always thought we didn't mind playing. I know it's easy to say now, but when there was always that rivalry between Essendon and us, and Mick and Sheeds was always on. But there was something about Geelong. Whenever we seemed to play Geelong, we seemed to have this. Don't know. We've got them, and we obviously didn't. So.
But watching the game a few times, what Niz just said, Evans in that second quarter, he was amazing. And I actually thought it was a move that I made, getting Heady off the half forward into the middle. That was the turning point. But it was Evo's couple of goals.
Oh, you've thrown that one in, have you?
There's 7 people made that move.
All right, we'll get that one out now. Who made the move?
Well, I know the person who gave the message.
Well, there you go. So the runner made the move.
So you're all convinced here that it was Rob's move. Brett Heady was moved into the midfield, which was a turning point in the grand final.
Well, talking to Niz on the bench, I heard the conversation. Heady's not getting a kick, so I was doing a message to someone else, and I went past. I said, "Brett, get yourself in the middle because they want to take you off."
The backstory here is though he had a hamstring issue and didn't play in the second semi-final. So he had to come into the team, which means you had to drop someone else. That was a no-brainer, was it?
Brett Heady.
Oh, he's a class player, mate.
First pick.
Brett Heady was one of the
player.
superstars in that team.
He's still a bit dirty though. He didn't get as many votes in the best and fairest because he reckons the forwards always got harshly dealt by. So he's probably right.
He's a terrific player.
Well, that move was made in the box and it was then sent down to Niz and Robbie. So, yeah.
All right. Well, this is Mick Malthouse's recollection of that crucial moment.
Well, Robbie Wiley will tell you it was his move. But my biggest worry about Brett Heady was, do we pull the trigger early where he is coming off a hamstring? And my worry was that if we pull it too soon and he does a string, we don't only lose someone who could go through the middle, we lose a good half-forward flanker.
So he was very concerned. He talked about his interview, very concerned about the hamstring injury. Obviously, was a big part of the build-up to the grand final. How much of a concern was it that he could go and then suddenly you're down a crucial player, with 2 on the bench at that time?
Well, he didn't play like that. He was worried about his hamstring.
I always thought Mick would never take a player in who he felt, from advice of the medical staff plus his own advice, he would never take unfit players in. So I think he would have, in the back of his mind, thought that he was okay to get through.
I also think Brett played a magnificent game that day. Brett didn't go through the centre too often in the Eagles side, really, did he? When he was Peter Sumich and Brett in the forward line were just a dynamic duo. I mean, they used to get everybody out. And even you had the Wilsons, the Langdons, even Evo around, but those two boys together were remarkable, you know. And Brett was how many goals did he kick on average a year? He was just for an half-forward flanker. He was an amazing player.
Can we just talk about the selection? Because you are a match committee, so obviously Heinze missed out, and so did the player I just mentioned, David Hart. Brett Heady come in, Michael Brennan came in from the second semi-final. Did you find it hard to make those decisions, or was it pretty straightforward?
Well, Robbie.
Very hard. You know, they're saying that I was favouring my brother-in-law and Michael Brennan.
Favouring you?
I never favoured. I'm always honest.
Robbie had one vote and he go 3.
The other person you left out of that, Mitchell White got left out too?
No, Mitchell.
That was
someone else
94.
got left out.
Missed out
Hines and
94.
Hart.
Hines and Hart were the two that played in the second semi-final against Geelong.
Yeah, look, it's always tough, you know, but as a match committee, you're always picking a side that you think, on balance, can beat that opposition. And so that's why there's lots of discussion. But in the end, I think we picked the right side.
Well, I think you look at someone like Michael Brennan, who was vice-captain. He was vice-captain for a reason, and it was a grand final for starters. And having watched the game a couple of weeks ago, as I said, he tried that hard physically. And so, yeah, I mean, and we won, you know. And in that third quarter, I think was 12 shots to 3 when the game was won. So, yeah.
I think, too, with Monkey, that he didn't play in the position that he normally plays. But it was more about his leadership, as Serge was saying. He was a real leader amongst those boys, vice-captain with Whoosh, but his leadership was so important to that group.
Well, this was Mick's take on the selection on grand final day.
It's a coach's role is to pick the best side. You pick your best 20, then you look who's out. And it just happened that when Heady was available, he was going to come in, and Brennan was going to come in because they were in our best side. And whoever fell out. That's just the facts of life. It's there's always an emotional attachment to players, some more than others, and you are going to make hard decisions. But you've got to get rid of the emotion when you're picking your best side against a certain opponent.
It doesn't happen, with just one discussion either. I mean, there was a lot of debate about who should play in that team, but in the end, we're playing a side that we knew we had to have the right mix. I mean, they were a really good side, Geelong, so there was no question we had to have the players and the leadership and the people with, that were going to do the job. And the guys that miss out, I mean, and it goes to this day, you need the squad to win the flag. It's very difficult to just rely on the 20 to 22 players to win it. So you need everyone. And fortunately, some of the guys that missed out got an opportunity a couple of years later.
Liz, I couldn't agree more. And I can remember a meeting that we had at the Hilton before we walked across to the G. And some of the players that missed out in that squad wrote letters and messages. And that was really powerful to me, and I reckon it meant a lot to the playing group too. So that stood, really clear in my mind.
Yeah, Adrian Barrich and Phil Scott wrote a letter that's been published, and I read it out, and emotion in the room when we left was amazing, but it was even more emotive when we walked across because of the banter with the crowd. But
with the kids running around and having a crack at Maney, and that was plenty going on.
Yeah, it was great. It was great.
I remember walking next to the biggest one with Rumatira. Rumatira had played arguably the final series when Bartlett in 80 and Ablett in 89, and Matera's final series was just remarkable. And he was convinced they were going to belt him in the grand final. And we were walking and talking, and he kept saying, "Oh, mate." And I'm like, I wanted to say, "I think you're exactly right, Roo. Someone's going to belt you." Because he'd just played so well, and he just looked like that was going to happen. And I thought the only way around it was to say, "Well, listen, who would you like to play?" And as we were sort of talking, he always calls you mate, mate this and mate that. "Oh, mate, I'd like to. I've had one chance. I'd play on Toby, and I've got no idea who's Toby." He said, "Toby Bairstow." I said, "Why Bairstow?" He said, "Oh, he's my brother's best. He'd never touch me." And we're laughing. We thought, well, there's no way that's going to happen. I remember you watch the start of the grand final, Matera turns around, he's got Bairstow on him. And Mick, and he look around, he's pointing like this. And Mick's going, "What's he doing?" And I laughing, don't worry. It's all good. It's Bairstow's on Matera." And Mick goes, "Bairstow?" And that Roo was like, he's never going to get hit that day. Because we really thought, especially when you think what happened when Ablett took Pike out, really, that was a massive hit early. And that's what we thought the game might go like. But thank Christ he didn't, because in the end, Roo was just flying off that wing.
The game gets underway and we're in a bit of trouble. Pike gets cleaned up, mentioned earlier, and we're down at quarter time. We're down at half time, in fact. But things do turn around, and you mentioned Tony Evans. Was he the best player on the day?
I wouldn't say on the day, but he was a very, very solid contributor, and he kicked those goals when we needed them. He kicked 3-1, I think. So, But no, I reckon everyone contributed. Like even people like, having watched the game a couple of weeks ago, Maney's first half before he was a bit injured. Carl Langdon, Peter Wilson, the bodies, and the little tap-ons and the quick handballs and all that. The contested footy was,
Don Pike getting up and playing I reckon would have been inspirational to the playing group.
Lammy ran down. Dwayne Lamb did some good things. I mean, obviously Sumich and Matera. I mean, what Sumich kicked 6.
Matera, Heady.
Yeah. Well, Matera won the Norm Smith, but Mick reckons that Tony Evans was the best player on the game.
Does he?
Well, Evo was always magnificent in big games. Just a big game player, and he got the ball rolling that day, and he was certainly in our best players. I mean, but we had a lot of good players that day.
Well, see, so Roos kicked 5, and the last one's a handball over the top from Sumich. If Sumich kicks that, he kicks 7, and Matera kicks 4. It's an interesting dynamic if that had happened.
What about just in that second quarter? So the pressure was on a fair bit. Ablett was starting to kick a few goals. Who do you think was the danger player for Geelong overall? Mick says Paul Couch was the big problem.
He was getting a bit of the football through the middle, and I think that's why he thought that Heady should go into the middle to see if he could, win a bit of the football. But I don't know. It was a bit hard for me running and seeing, but to me they were just playing more as an even side, and there wasn't one particular player. I mean, Ablett was always a concern because he was a match winner.
Michael was always very good at defensively picking up who he thought was causing you Ablett might be kicking the goals, but who was getting it to him. Mick was always really good on cut the supply down. So if he was worrying about Couch, you could get on Couch, would have been having a fair bit to play. Mickey was really good on cutting the supply. And he'd get someone to do. He wouldn't sit back and watch, just let that go. He would often do something about it and make sure that you let's stop it. And that's why he loved Dwayne and Pike in particular, those boys, or even Maney, do a defensive job on a wing, We try with sometimes the Roo, but Roo didn't really understand the defensive side of it. But
he was actually pretty good on the attacking. Don't worry about that. He was outstanding.
It's a little known stat that the Cats actually, in the regular season, had the highest points total in the history of the game. It's actually a remarkable effort to shut them down the way it was. Did you think the defence was huge on the day?
But we beat them 3 times during the year. So they might have been the highest scoring side, but they weren't the highest scoring side against us.
I thought as the game went on, Jakovic got better at centre half back, and McIntosh got better at full back. So we, and McKenna.
Worst fault players on Ablett. Look at the side. That was a big part of it.
And even though Ablett kicked 3 goals or something, Woosha did some very good things and some really hard things. Some things that you go now, you can't do that.
Because Lamb played on Scott that day, did he? Right?
Yes, he
chased him down at one stage, didn't he? Remember he took off and Fatty turned and Scott go and he catches him that last bit. I think, like everyone said, I think all those players, every one of them at some stage did something in that game which you find, I think, in winning a premiership. But they could all, and they're really interesting to listen to those boys. It's interesting when you talk to them about the way they talk about that game. You get Hetty and Kemp together talking about their game when they finish each other's sentences, and you'll be like, my God, they've got great memories. And that was one of the great days we had when we got together downstairs at Steve's that day. We all sat around.
Yeah, and talked about it. Yeah,
they were just we couldn't believe some of the comments they were making as the game went on. That
we had some really good young players in that team.
Yep.
Djakovic and White, and they were young. McIntosh, a young player. Kemp and Hetty in their second or third years. I mean, we had a lot of young kids playing, and they're all household names now, and they're outstanding players. But they were still learning their trade. So
McIntosh is. Remember we first took him over in '91. Talk about '91 comparing to '92. I think he had 12 bread rolls for dinner. And couldn't run a yard the next day.
Got the big
that
bath.
was learning how to
remember
play.
He went and got the hot bath, and blew himself up. He was like,
He'd not been a pretty good player for the Eagles.
Jeez.
What about in that third term when we started to gain control? There was that freak goal by Peter Wilson, the Matera goal on the run, which was amazing, and then we hit the front. What was the feelings like at that time? Was there confidence? Was there, right, we need to keep going from here?
Oh, well, I suppose yes, but 28-minute mark of the last quarter when we're 5 up and we're going to win, and Mick's blowing down the phone to Niz, and Niz was blowing
we were getting more and more nervous
so
as the game
I don't think
went
we
on.
knew we had it until the final siren went, even though we were 5 goals up, and Niz and I blew it on the bench. Oh, it was just amazing. That was the focus, and that was Mick, and that was why he was such a
Wouldn't
great
leave
coach.
the box, and it was just, we couldn't believe it. When the siren went, I'm like, it was unbelievable feeling.
So what was the moment that each of you individually knew we're probably going to win the first flag?
It's difficult on the bench because you're just focused. I mean, I don't look at, certainly never looked at time and that, because I had an open dialogue with Mick. So it was sometimes Michael would just go hard from start to finish, and of course I was relaying messages to Robbie right up till the last 30 seconds. And it was difficult because
you don't get the time clock now. Like now, you sit there, you're in the box, you are so wide to exactly what's going on. We didn't have that, so you don't know really how you're sitting there, and we would exactly where we are. We know we can hear Mick and talking to Niz and to Rob. So and in the box I reckon the tension just sort of lifted in that last quarter, because I think we all didn't, without saying it, we're thinking, we are going to do this. It was all right to have dreamed about it, but to actually think, my God, we're going to do it. I think that's the thing. And to go forward one more step, Trevor Sprigg was one of the hardest blokes that played footy, one of the toughest guys ever. I never forget, it wasn't after the game, he was terrific after the game. He was a dawn. We were all so jubilant, and we were walking across the old bridge across the railway line to go over to the glass house. And there was Diane, Trevor's wife, Lynn, and myself. And I know four of us got.
I was back with your wife in the rooms.
No, we were no drivers there, but we were walking. And I looked over, and Spriggy was just walking, and he was just bawling. And I'm like, I'd never seen Trevor Sprigg cry ever. And I'm like, and he said, I just can't. And Lynn thought he'd hurt himself, And then all of a sudden she realised it was just the emotion coming out of him, And it was, and I think Mickey got. I mean, we all at some stage had tears about it when we talked about it.
Not me.
The bullshit. You're one of the great ones.
No, Robbie called it with about a couple of minutes to go. We got him. I don't know why you're carrying on. But, I was carrying on because I had the lunatic in my ear.
Keep him going.
I think the momentum that we created in the third quarter, we knew that we were on the right track, but you can never get ahead of yourself in football because it can change very quickly. And I think that was the feeling that I had. But, my confidence grew as in the last quarter when we kept kicking a few more goals, and we were never going to lose that game, but we couldn't be ahead of ourselves. We had to stay focused, and particularly, Niz on the bench, because we had players on the bench and I was relaying messages, I just had to keep them, their heads into the game. So, we couldn't get ahead of ourselves.
Mick described relief as the emotion for him. Was that what it was like for you guys, or was there jubilant? Was there an understanding of the enormity of what was achieved?
I suppose Mick had been coaching for a while, so as a coach, you want to win a premiership, and it was probably relief there for us. I think it was more a sign that we were a pretty good side. to me in '94, I felt that it certainly made sure we were an outstanding side to win 2 in 3 years. But the relief, I think it was just reward for our consistency, because 90, 91, we were about there, 92, you know. I think it was more of consistency, that we were pretty good and that we deserved it.
You had a great moment with Brett Heady where you embraced him. That was on the coverage after the game.
Chris Mainwaring.
I think there was one with Brett as well when you
the one
a little
that was
bit
in
later.
The West. The one in the West was
the one in the
Mainwaring.
West was there.
Main, yeah.
Jumping up off the bench is the iconic photo of you and Maney.
Yeah.
But I think you did have one. I mean, I think we.
Oh,
I think if we
which is where the move came into there. Oh, he was the one. Yeah. What about the rest of you? Was there a moment that you, one of the first people you might have jumped into the arms of or shared, the early moment after the grand final?
I was still getting messages from Mike.
Well, I think in the box, there's a great picture in the box of all of us where we were, I go like an idiot, Mick's, we were all over Mick. And because Mick hadn't gone down, and this is how, and Mick could have very easily, as the sort of, was done to go down and be on the bench when Mickey was not leaving that box until the siren went, there was no way. And so we were like sort of, and then we were all pretty, when you guys got together and we came down, the ground was pretty emotional. When Mick got to you two and we were sort of, there was 4 or 5 of us together, I remember that part.
Well, we were a group that had been together for 3 years as a match committee, so it was pretty special for us as a group. I mean, the players did it all.
But you also respected each other because you knew each other in football circles for a long time.
Yeah, yep, definitely, yeah.
I agree with Robbie. It was more reward for us, not relief for me. It was just and to be part of a great team, the players and the match committee.
I think Michael's relief, and I can understand why he said it, because I remember trying to go up and get him to come down. He wouldn't come down in 91, and Nizzy said to me, Gepp, you go and get him, and he's got to come down and talk. And Mick said, I remember, and Mick can get really, and Nanette walked out and he said, I'll come down, but you won't be happy with what I've got to say. And I said, look, it's not that. And I think the pressure Michael wanted to put on the team and everyone around the team, he did, but that put enormous pressure on him too. He knew that he'd really gone after them, that we can do this, but to do it, you've got to get better at whatever it was. And so there's no doubt he felt he had to prove himself, and even just the rivalry between him and Sheedy. Like Sheedy and him having played together at Richmond and Sheedy being so successful, and Michael was determined to be, and he was always going to be, an outstanding coach. But you've got to win a premiership to be an outstanding coach, and that was his first one. So I can imagine the sheer relief for Michael.
Yeah. And that's a bit of what he said in 91. It's no good just being in a grand final. You've got to win one. Don't just turn up.
People forget how good Mick was as football knowledge was amazing, tactically amazing, preparation was amazing, but his speeches were absolutely, you just listen in awe. He was such a great talker, and I think, speaking to Chris Judd when Mick went to Carlton, he said, I could just sit in that lecture theatre and listen to Mick, the way he talks about football, So I know we're a little bit off there, but the reason why he was a great coach is because, all that packaged together.
What was the night like after the grand final?
Jeppy can't remember it.
No, it was the Hilton. We had a massive night. It was I always was very happy that we were staying at the Hilton. Remember, we had the superstition that if you're at the Hilton, and it was that was a hell of a show that night.
Well, it's a big night. Yeah, I think the initial thing was coming to a realisation that we actually won it. I mean, we'd gone through a pretty tough patch the year before, and Michael's speech after our chairman sat down in 91 was a little different to our chairman's speech. So it was, he had everyone on notice that yes, we'd done okay, but okay is not good enough to win an AFL Premiership. We have to be much better, and we were. So 92, we partied hard, and it was fantastic. All the players were so jubilant, and the squad members that happened to be there as well, they all joined in. So that was the good thing. We still had, it wasn't the days where we took everyone over. It was a matter of those guys who made their own way over joined in, and it was fabulous for them.
I can remember just so many photos of the Premiership Cup, and of course, my brother-in-law Michael Brennan was there with his family and my late wife, and that really clear in my mind how jubilant everyone, the whole family, to be and having photos of that Premiership Cup. But the other thing too is the aftermath when we came home with the plane and the airport. How that was just packed, shoulder to shoulder. It was amazing of the jubilation of that Premiership Cup, what it did to so many people.
Great Eastern Highway was just
But remember nowadays you have the phones, you see everything. One of the photos that really resonated with all of us that we couldn't believe was when they showed, when the game was about to start, at some stage someone showed us Channel 7 footage of the Narrows Bridge and not a car going across it. And we were like, and you're looking at that and they're saying, what, that's taken just as the ball's about to be, and there wasn't a car on the road. And that was to us like, my God, that just showed again how massive the game was, that everybody was in Perth watching the game. And as the boy said, we made one blue when we came back. The bus we had had tinted windows and we had to open the door because the traffic, and blokes had to take their time hanging out the door with the cup so people could see it. And Mick was the one that he said, you've got to show it, because we had to open the door because no one could see. And all these people had lined up all the way to Subi, but we never thought about having an open-tiered bus or windows you could see out of. It was just the bus that took us normally,
Well, Mick Malthouse actually made a comment about what it was like, the return to Perth.
Oh no, I think it was far bigger than what any of us thought. I don't care what the players say now. There's no question that we're all in the same boat. We were absolutely astounded at, what did take place. We knew we had a great following. There's no question. But I know Trevor will be probably watching this at some stage. But when we come together in 1989, October or November, we were fourth back page. Early into the season, we were fourth back page, and we're third back page. We didn't get back pages until we started winning a few games because the Eagles were on the nose. So it was in a very short period of time, in that next 3 years, we were able to turn it around and have all those lucky Fremantle people who used to barrack for the Eagles had some good times.
That's pretty funny.
He couldn't help that. Couldn't throw that straight in. Make the stocks hears that.
It was kind of like the return of the Beatles. It was massive. The streets and the parade afterwards as well, wasn't it?
Oh, it was extraordinary. I think in fairness, Michael was outstanding as a football coach, and we all acknowledge that. But he also let the players embrace all of those things, and there wasn't the restrictions and that you've got to put on players. Now the players were having a great time and getting engaged, but they all did all their media commitments. They did what they had to do, and I think the public of Perth just really got on side and thought these guys deserve all the accolades they get, and rightfully so. I mean, they're very hard to win, and being the first, I think those guys should be so proud of themselves.
I think that's what Spriggy said, made the comment. He said, it's like climbing Everest. He said, I know what it's like to have climbed Everest now. And we were laughing, and he said, I never thought we were going to do it. And he'd been around footy for a long time, and Tassie in his day, and seen a lot of state football, and he thought, nah.
And as we've mentioned, we're the first team to travel every second week from one side of the country to the other to win the national competition. So, yeah, it's an amazing feat. Those players were amazing, how they're able to endure all those obstacles that were placed in them. So,
what about the fan base and how it grew from there and it became such a bigger club on the back of this?
Oh, I think they've been amazing, and just to be fortunate enough myself to be part of the club for a long period of time and see the way it's been built up. It's just been amazing, and without that fan base, you couldn't do. And the not just the supporters, but the corporates and all that, who backed us in. And I think we've rewarded them over the years pretty well for a team that hasn't been in the competition that long.
Sergeant, I often say that I was really lucky because I was in the original 87 squad, where we didn't have an oval, we didn't have change rooms, we didn't have an identity really. And to see the club grow from training at the back of Aquinas Oval to 92 to win a flag, and then their successes after that, it's just a credit to the footy club and the way they've gone about it.
And I think also that we've mentioned before about what the East has done, but look, take Sheedy. I mean, you talk to Kevin, one of the great football people, and he was determined to beat the Eagles before we won one. But once we won one, the person that was most determined to split Western Australia if he could was Sheedy. He was always determined to make sure the other side came in because he realised the one way to try and break this, otherwise you'll never catch West Coast, was always his comment. And I think Eddie says the same things. They still sit back and say at times, I can't believe you guys have been able to win, play in 7 and win 4. Sheedy, that's always his numbers. He's great. Playing in 7 and win 4, don't know how you've done it. And I think that there's so many great people and so many great and really great players. Along with getting Michael over was one of the master strokes. I remember when Robbie rang me and said that this was going to happen. I'm like, really? They're going to pick Mick? And wow, it was just master stroke.
How tough of a sell was that initially?
To West Australians, it was tough to start with, and Michael encountered a lot of abuse and a lot of things that he. Luckily, he's pretty thick-skinned and been able to cope with all of that, but he probably copped that at Footscray anyway. But, I mean, in the end, it was a matter of getting the right people around him to help him mould what we thought was a pretty good playing list. I think when he first came in, he thought the list needed a lot of restructuring, and it did, and it needed a bit of renovation, and fortunately, we drafted really well, and we started to add to our list that gave us, that competitiveness that you need to win.
Michael had a great ability on that side of things, but I think the confidence that he gave the team, you're going to play the Bulldogs at the Western Oval, and he would talk about, right, the wind's going to be like this, and this is what's going to happen, and the players would be like listening, and when they got there, exactly what Michael would, because he was such a student of everywhere that you played, and he loved that side of it, that he would take, I reckon he gave the team a lot of confidence that we were pretty good in Perth, when we always were, but to always win it, you had to win a number of games in the East, and you knew you had to win at the MCG. I think that was, in the end, was one of his great traits was his understanding of the competition and knowing what we had to do.
And the other side of it is that as West Australians, we were very good at attacking football. Mick brought the defensive side in, and he often would say to me, people say I'm a defensive coach. And I said, well, you are, Mick. He was an amazingly defensive side. And when you talked about Geelong's record at kicking goals in the 92 season, but not against West Coast, as Tim said, he just taught the West Australians, our side in the 90s, how to defend. And that, most premierships come off a good defensive side.
Exactly. And the way we trained, you'd come and watch the Eagles train in the 90s, and if we dropped the ball, or the way that he would run training, and he could be on the other end of the ground and someone would muck around and he would spin around and he'd, Jufa, I saw, and they'd be like, how the hell's he seen that? He had an amazing ability that when the team was on the training track, they were absolutely raised the bar, and I think that was something that he taught a lot of those guys, the professionalism you need to play at this level and what he expected, and they were so good that they trained. And you'd think we'd do circle work or the ball would touch the ground in lane work, and if blokes dropped it, people would be looking, what are you doing?
That is going back to the 90s, isn't it, Tim? Circle work.
I reckon that I agree with totally what you both said, but also he taught we're not just a West Australian side. That's what you're saying. And that was the difference.
I know we had to win away from home. That was a key ingredient to where Mick was coming from, and that meant our preparation had to be better. We had to be fitter, we had to be smarter, we had to do things that were so different to what our guys had been used to, and in the end, that's what we did. I think we were the first team to ever win at the MCG.
Yeah.
Friday night.
We beat Richmond, I think, didn't we, in 1990. So there was a lot of things that were firsts for the club in those days, and Michael was instrumental in providing that.
Michael had a great sense, still got a great sense of humour. So he loved the players that had that sense of humour about them too. He wouldn't go looking for them, but he loved there was something, if he found something funny or if a player found something funny, they always had a good time. I'll never forget one day at training. Remember we had those 3 boys that had disabilities that would always come and watch us train, and in those days they had the terrace at Subi, and these 3 boys would turn up in their full kit, socks, and they'd play on the cement and they'd watch us train, and all the players knew them, they knew them by name, and they'd come to more sessions than not. And one particular training session, it might have even been 92, Mick stopped the session and he called the 3 boys and he said, get on the ground, and he said, right, take the football from one end to the other. And these three guys, and down they've gone, all the boys have got back and they're bouncing the ball down, handballing, and they were just, they're smiling, and the whole team's just erupted when they got to the end and kicked the goal. And Mick's like, just nodded to himself. Just the way that brought the team together. And then he's like, right, get back over the fence now. Hop, and over they'd hop.
Every session.
Every session,
fantastic.
Yeah.
There's probably one more thing I just want to ask you guys around football clubs. And Mick talks about this, we'll play this in a second, but how important is it, and especially back then where the club's really big now, but back then it probably took everyone, volunteers included, to really run the club and make it successful. How important was that back then?
Well, the Monday night barbecues, the boys used to cook a barbecue up for the guys. It was, we look forward to Monday night because we got a great steak. And, so to me, the volunteers, he used to get some fish, didn't he, Mick, from one of the volunteers?
Yeah, Mick, we didn't get it, but Mick did. Yeah. But Trevor Barron used to taste the steaks 2 or 3 before we ate any.
Well, it's Trevor Barron, Milton Tanner, Ronnie Lorimer, Morris Lorimer. I mean, these sort of guys. Wonderful people, and they were just brilliant for our footy club when we were trying to establish that this is a good place to be, and the players loved them, and they provided, the backbone that we really needed, and those guys came to the club with Toddy, and John was obviously part of the build for where we got to in '92, and it was incredible, really. Those guys, the volunteers around the place. We probably had 30 or 40 volunteers in those days because no one was full time other than half a dozen of us.
This is what Mick Malthouse says about what it takes to win a premiership.
I've never seen a football side ever win a premiership, but I've seen a lot of football clubs win premierships. You need on board a board that is supportive and points in your right direction. Administration that acknowledges the board and helps the football department, doesn't cause hurdles to be jumped over. And then you've got to have your good football people, from Trevor Nisbett, who was absolutely outstanding in his role. Absolutely, you couldn't have picked anyone better in his role. Clear head, understood the game. Then the match committee. Then family, and not necessarily last of all the players. The players are the ones that go down that race and risk their head and put their head over the footy and turn up to play. So football teams don't win, football clubs win premierships. And that's what happened that year. Our football club won the premiership.
Sums it up pretty well, doesn't it?
Well, he's a hard man, Mick. And I think, being hard on the field certainly gave players direction. Being hard off the field, and Niz was an amazing administrator that gave us direction. And when you combine both, we got it right off the field and we got it right on the field. And that was what we needed. Amazing direction.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. We hope you enjoyed this first episode of History Makers. Stay tuned for our next episode as we continue to relive the 1992 Premiership season.